Way now for the second talk in the studio for this morning, and the title of this talk is Cloud Meets Word Processor, RDF and abiword in the browser. We have two speakers contributing to this talk. The first, standing right next to me right now, is Ben Martin. He's been working on file system related code for over 10 years. He is a BIT, an MIT, and a PhD in information technology, and very broad experience on a number of systems which I won't go through. He has written numerous articles on the open source software and presented libferus and other projects at OLS 7, libcongress 05 and 8, LCA 2011, NLUG 2009, UK UG 2010, and ODSC 2010, among others. Speaking after him will be Associate Professor Martin Savoy, particle physicist. He performs his experiments at the world's highest intensity energy particle accelerators in the world at Japan and CERN in Switzerland, France and Italy. He employs these to investigate the cause of universal matter-antimatter symmetry. At night, he is heavily involved in the free software community and has been a core developer of abiword multi-platform word processor since 2000. He presented at the abiCollab feature at abiword and LCA 2008 and has made many public presentations on the topics of abiword, physics, energy and nuclear power. Please give both of our speakers a very warm welcome.
Alrighty, we're talking today about a couple of things that are coming out in abiword 3. Martin will be talking about the abiCollab, which allows both server-based and peer-to-peer real-time collaboration in abiword. I'll be talking mainly about RDF stuff. I was going to add a little preface to this, that this being the only ODF talk at LCA, and I think ODF is actually extremely important because it's sort of, if you imagine the web, except without CSS, without HTML and without JavaScript, but you actually have to use a Microsoft format and you have to run VB script and you have to have base64 encoded really nasty binary blobs coming off the web. This is sort of the vision that some companies want to have of document computing, whereas with ODF you have some would say painfully open document standard, because companies that may have a negative interest are actually on the board of OASIS forming new ODF standards. But the flip side is that it's very easy as an open source developer to become an OASIS member, and if you're developing ODF code, you can become an OASIS member for free, and you can actually have a say in the future of the open document format, which I think is a wonderful thing, and I encourage more people to do so because it might counter some of the evil intentions that are floating around there as well. Two-part talk. I'm doing ODF stuff and Martin's doing abiCollab, and there are many more cool features. If you want to see RDF in abiword, I have it installed on this laptop, and I'm assuming there's going to be no time for me to show you here, but if you come and sort of prod me later in the day or whenever, I can probably talk more about RDF than you want to hear. If you're running abiword, I apologize, some of the icons up the top, I write code, I don't draw icons. But if you run abiword and you load a document that is enriched with RDF, you'll get these purple links. One of the downsides that some companies have said is if you have ODF and you have RDF, you have this hidden information in the document, and they're really fairly uncomfortable obviously with that. So in this case, things that are linked to RDF, I show graphically as hyperlinks, so you can see anything that's purple is going to have extra information associated. If you mouse over James, you'll see the XML ID that links the RDF, how many triples of RDF are actually linked to that, and the start and end is more of a debugging thing. The icons up the top, R actually does change tracking. We're looking at sort of the top toolbar. The R with an F actually selects the first reference. Yep. Ah, excellent. I have an evil pseudo-illegal laser pointer. Excellent stuff. I don't have a laser pointer. Yes, so these buttons here. This one here, if your mouse is anywhere in James and you click there, it highlights the whole extent of things that are associated with that RDF. And the cool part is then that these are basically next and previous buttons. So if you've highlighted that James, it'll take you to there, and vice versa. And these tie in with something that I'll talk about a little further along. If you're editing RDF, most people say you've got RDF, you've got triples, this is going to be really hard to use. And this is one of my core objectives to doing all of this. I mean, yes, RDF is part of the ODF 1.2 standard. It's out there. It is actually part of the document format. We should use it. But we should also make it really easy for people to use it, rather than sort of saying, oh, RDF's great, and I convince you that RDF's great, and you have to do triples, and you have to really, really get into it. I want to say, maybe your document could become smarter, and maybe this is going to be handy for you. And you don't, if you want to know RDF, great. If you don't want to know RDF, it's going to be more useful for you without knowing it. So in this case, the James thing, I just say edit a semantic item, and abiword says, that's actually a contact, that's a person. So these are some of the things that I know about people. I know they've got a nickname, an email address, I know they've got a phone number. So it can present the information to you in a way that makes it easier for you to edit and update. If you want to create a new one, you can go through the menu, just make a new contact from file, import a vCard. If you've got abiword open and you want to cite James or John, and you have them in Evolution or you have them in your KOF in some groupware program, drag and drop them straight into the document. You're creating RDF, but you're not actually worried about the triples. Unless you want to be. And this is something that I've added in the last week or so. If you right-click on one of the RDF links, and you can set this as a source item, and then if you right-click on some other RDF item, you can say, these two things are related, because RDF is all about basically the underlying technology of the semantic web. So you're giving things explicit semantics that the computer can understand, but then you're saying these two items that you know about, this event, this person. You can say this person is talking at this event, and the computer says, great, I know not only that there's an event and there's a person, but I know the relation between these two things. I know it's going to be a speaker. So in this case, I'm just using friend of a friend, and I'm saying that Mark knows James. And then abiword knows that Mark knows James, and that these are two people. So consequently, may not be, that'll be later. So anyway, one of the other interesting things is if you have RDF sitting behind all of these things in the document itself, the text of the document becomes like a second-class citizen all of a sudden. Instead of having James, you can right-click and say, show me his nick and his phone number. At that point, I want to see that. Or I've got James in a letterhead, and I want to have his address. And abiword has all of that information in the RDF. So you can have various citations to the RDF appear differently in the document, and you can have that automatically updated. ODF and RDF, the ODF standard has all of the usual content and styles, but now with manifest, basically, this is the big point that I see, and I will have gained this viewpoint over working with this, that the semantic web, many people sort of criticize it and say, what company in their right mind is going to say, I've got all this HTML, I'm going to mark it up with RDF and put semantics in there just for everyone in the public to use. But if you have document formats and a company can see that if they actually mark things up and if they have contact information and if they put the semantics into the document, it's going to actually help the company. They have an incentive to actually use RDF in the real world. So I can see that, in my point of view, if you have the combination of these things, which is really just ODF because ODF has provisions for RDF, you have the ability to start pushing semantic web technology and making it real world usable. So you basically have semantic web stuff in a single file where managers and sort of normal people can edit them rather than having to give them to the web guy and sort of push information out read-only. And the corporate incentive to actually start using RDF. If I send somebody an ODF file, it doesn't have nasty viruses, binary blobs, base64 encoded stuff, and when they open it up, they can say, oh, there's Ben's contact, there's Ben's geolocation, and this is the event that he's talking at. And then they can just bring those onto their phone. It makes life easier for people. Content XML in ODF, sort of, anyone who's done HTML, it's not really incredibly nasty. So in this particular case, where was I going? Yes, interesting. How many people have played with RDF? Okay. In RDF, everything is described as triples, and triples use URIs. So you can say, Ben speaks at LCA 2012, and triples can be implied from other triples. RDF for hackers if you're looking at storing information in an ISAM, you might say, someone's got a customer ID and various key values. So then you're going to compact that and say this particular key is mapping to all of the values. And then you turn around and say, I want a query language on top of that, I want secondary indexes, how do I actually do composite packing of key values? And it starts to get a little bit nastier. When you're starting to look in the same information in RDF, you turn around and express everything as triples and say this person's a customer with a certain ID and name, they like riding this particular bike in this time frame. And instead of trying to do secondary indexing and linking, putting types and doing sort of ISAM, but it's low-level stuff and saying this actually links to this other ISAM table and building query languages on top, you can just put linking directly in, which is the whole, this person knows this other person, this person is speaking at this event. Anything that you describe as an entity in RDF, you can then link in a semantic way to some other object in RDF. This is the whole semantic web. But instead of doing hrefs where one thing points over there and there's nothing known about that point, you can actually say why it points there. And you can say this relationship is symmetric or asymmetric. And it's a far more rich way of doing things. But then looking at it again from the hacker perspective, you look at it and say all triples then can actually be shoved into an ISAM store. So you get 3 index sequential access lookup tables, which a lot of RDF stores actually do. And the querying thereof with Sparkle, which is getting further and further away from the screenshots now that I look at it. If you're looking at this from a hacker point of view, some people say triples and RDF are going to be horribly slow, and a lot of RDF stores are, but they don't really query it. There's no reason that RDF and Sparkle queries need to be slow. In this case, you have customer ID and you have a number. You're going to have a fairly low selectivity or high selectivity with that. So there's probably going to be only one customer with that ID number. So if you're evaluating the query or writing the query evaluator, this should actually execute in milliseconds, even if you're having to hit disk. Current state of RDF, ODF support. OpenOffice, LibreOffice can read, write, and has an API internally, but they don't expose it, which I think is a horrific mistake, because yes, it's there. If you have RDF, it gets read and written, but you can't interact with it. So unless you're actually taking the time to send patches and play around with code, most people aren't going to use it. abiword and Calligra both have read-write, both have API, both have copy and paste, which respects IDs, both have drop and drag support, and you can actually grab a chunk of text which has RDF in it from abiword, copy it to the clipboard, which makes an ODF file on the clipboard, paste it into Calligra, and the RDF triples go with it. So RDF is moving around the desktop. People on Oasis said that could never happen, that copy and paste with RDF was flawed. Evidently it's runnable and not flawed. The GUI in abiword has sort of come to fruition in the last sort of 2 or 3 weeks. So yes, if I show you a demo and things collapse horribly, then they won't collapse horribly when I get home. Famous last words. ODF and ODT, a lot of the way, the next slide sort of shows this in a way that probably no one can see. But these coloured blobs, basically this is the, is that one? Yes, this is content XML. Any element in context, or many elements in context XML can have an XML ID. Usual sort of XML things, XML ID, doesn't really matter what the value is as long as it's unique throughout the whole XML document. And that actually forms a very nice bridge. This is your RDF graph over here. And anything in RDF, you can say, this piece of RDF actually references this XML ID and content XML. So you build a bridge between RDF and the actual text of your document. This is important because in RDF you can have one, like say my contact, can be cited 50 times in content XML. So these bridges through XML IDs, there's no reason this has to be a one-to-one relation. You can have 50 citations to Ben, you can have no citations to Ben. And this is fairly well saying the same thing I just did. Content XML, if I want to have LCA and I want to make that a purple link, XML ID really doesn't matter what this value here is. And if you're looking at the RDF side of things, if you really want to, because this is LCA, I can show you all of the XML in RDF. Excellent. So you basically say that this is the RDF URI and it has a citation to 2 different in the document, two different locations in the document are actually going to be linked to that RDF. And there's no reason there that I can't have one of them have, you know, the LCA logo with the telescope, and the other one just say, you know, LCA 2012. And if you really want, then you can then click on that and say, well, show me its home page, or show me the Flickr feed for LCA, or various other things. RDF and locations. Geo84 isn't a bad standard for RDF. If you're sort of thinking, you know, I'll have some identifier, give it a digital longitude and latitude. If you're a Lisp guy, then basically, yes, you can put linked lists in RDF. And if you like CDR and CAR, then you'll love doing linked lists of two coordinates. Basically, yes, a rest pointer to another unique ID and then a rest pointer to null. And the longitude and latitude coordinates are there. KOffice, Calligra, and abiword can both read and understand both of these formats. So if you do have Geo84 data, you can quite readily bring that in. There are dialogues in abiword to import RDF XML files. Once you have RDF XML files, you can select a piece of text in abiword and then link it to these locations. And that's what contact looks like in the FOF vocabulary, which I might just skip over there. Implementation gotchas. Since I've implemented RDF in a couple of Office suites, in some cases the XML IDs are bound to change on load. In KOffice, this was actually a design decision from the KOffice guys. In which case, as soon as you change an XML ID, because RDF might be linked through that bridge that I was talking about to the stuff in content via the XML ID, if you change that value, you need to know the old XML ID and the new XML ID, and then modify the RDF appropriately so that that change doesn't drop the RDF link from the document. Copy and paste in abiword. If you drop and drag between two documents and you have if you've chosen an XML ID that has meaning to you for whatever reason, if that XML ID is not in use, it will maintain it. If it is in use, it has to change it, so it will. And one of the hardest implementation gotchas from any programming perspective is that multi-class data. If you have a section of the document and you say this has an XML ID of foo, there's nothing stopping the RDF to say, you know, foo is associated with an event, a location, or, you know, foo happens to be a bolt with a certain thread size. So you have multiple classes of data sitting in the RDF, and from a GUI perspective, you want to sort of say, you know, how am I going to show the user that? How do I go about actually writing the program to do that? Another interesting one, and this is actually quite powerful in abiword, the Sparkle implementation uses the piece table behind the scenes. So when you're evaluating a query, you're actually evaluating it against a native abiword data model. And in some cases, this can be an interesting implementation gotcha, especially if you don't have a Sparkle evaluation engine. Well, I'll move on to that one. The API in abiword for getting at this, if you're actually doing programming stuff, which I assume some people here may or may not want to do, given a position or an XML ID in the document, you can get a handle to what the RDF triples are there. Get a single RDF object in the triple, or arcs out. Later on, you can do things like give me all of the contacts from RDF that are associated with the document, show and edit a window to let people edit those, export them to whatever file format's going to make sense. Just making sure I'm doing all right for time. The RDF semantic item view site, because a specific RDF like my contact information can be cited 5 or 6 times, you have to tell it, you know, you want my one, but you want this particular citation. And from the view site, you can then do things that are applicable just to that particular purple link in the document. So apply a style sheet to it, select it, remove it. Yes, in the future, these are the things that I was wanting to do. Web integration and relations. I'd really like to be able to capture in RDF and say these are things like I'm catching a train. And then if you, in abiword, you can right-click and sort of say, well, is that train on time? Or, you know, integrate with things that are on the web and the larger semantic web, linking open data. So you can say, this is, you know, LAX, and then right-click and say, you know, go and grab the exact location. LAX is an airport. Go to a web service, find out what you know about it. and to capture more relations between things in the document, and also to view relations. When you're capturing it at the moment through the menu, you can capture them, and then you can say, like if I say Mark knows John, I can right click on Mark and then say select someone that Mark knows, and it'll say, Mark knows John, and select John for you. But I'd really like to be able to have views where you've got circles around things and arrows, and actually graphically showing you on a page what your relations between certain things are from the semantics that you've given abiword. Relative to the RDF inference, I was playing around with various ways of doing that so that you can have, in the RDF, you can actually say to abiword how you want that presented. So if you have a contact, you can say, this is the exact layout of a chunk of ODF document that I want you to use, or I want you to make available to show people this particular contact. So then you could have business cards that are in some ways self-forming. If I put someone's contact in there, I'll already have the layout for my business card, and I can just apply that as a style sheet. So again, things that are in your content XML, like this is Mark, the actual text, the 4 characters Mark actually mean nothing, because you can turn around and say, I don't want to see that, I want to see 4 lines with their full address or their full postal address, or I'd like to see their website in brackets. On the Calligra side, I'd like to see NepoMark integration, and I want to also really want to maintain the ability for abiword and Calligra to everything they do in RDF to actually be able to talk to each other quite happily, like things like being able to drag and drop RDF objects from Calligra into abiword. I think it's quite important that ODF supported well on the desktop, and not only that, but use cases, especially for the OASIS committee, where you can say, yes, RDF's there, and not only that, but you can do cross-application RDF. And some things for MAMO using Bluetooth RDF, mesh-based RDF, and taking advantage of other stuff on mobile devices like geolocation, so you can insert your current location into a document, sort of making the document one of the main go-tos when you're playing around. If you right-click and you want to actually have full disclosure, I've right-clicked here on James, and these are the triples that are associated just with James. What do I have on the for this case, it's interesting because restrict to RDF link, basically the document itself can have hundreds of triples, but since I've clicked just on that one, then this is just showing me any RDF that's related just to that particular section of the document. And that was kind of fun. There's implementation details there that are a lot of fun, but I'll skip over those, I think. And if in this case you have contact and location, so it's showing you, noting that it's actually a plural there, so it's letting you know that in this case you've got a person and you've got where they're actually stored at, well where they're residing or physically located at the moment. This is currently one of the ways that I'm seeing of getting around the fact that there's multi-class data in RDF that are associated with specific locations in the document. And again, if you're wanting to edit RDF, instead of knowing the digital longitude and digital latitude, you can just insert, I'd like a new location, and drag the map around and then save that location. So RDF is sort of usable. Yes, I now have Perl Thai for libferris, which is completely unrelated. But if you want to do Perl-based programming with libferris, and you want to actually mount Flickr and various other web services, and then tie them to a file handle and print, and then untie them, in this case I'm making a PDF using print from Perl, then yes, this is possible now. But that has nothing to do with abiword. So that's the end of my part of the talk, and now I'll let Martin take over and do a more professional talk. I actually recommend taking this thing off, So it doesn't, you want the point?
Yeah, thanks. Awesome. Well, it's been wonderful to have Ben working with abiword for the last couple of years. And as you can see, he's done all sorts of awesome things with RDF. And what I'm going to talk about now is how we combine RDF and our real-time document collaboration feature. So first off, I just pimp abiword a little bit more. Full-featured, open-source, cross-platform word processor. So, of course, it's available for Linux, and it's also totally available for Windows, and it's 99.95% available for OS X. I hope to do that last 0.05% shortly. So abiCollab is this feature which allows real-time collaboration between arbitrary numbers of abiword sessions. It's great for collaborative document creation. So, you know, physicists often work on a joint document. We often write proposals together. We often write papers together. And this abiword is, with abiCollab, is perfect for this because you don't have to email anything around. You just have a single document. You don't have to wait for someone to finish their edit before you can do your own. So the nice thing about abiCollab is it can operate without a server and without any sort of locking. So consequently, it's perfect for the OLPC project, and it's one of the core features of OLPC Write is this collaborative working together of school children, and abiCollab provides the basis of doing that. In addition, over the last few years, we've introduced the abicollab.net web service. It provides a central document repository, and one of the things that we discovered when we put together abiCollab is it's actually very hard for ordinary people to find each other on the internet. About the only way you can do it is via an email address, and then the only way you can sort of link email addresses together is to have some sort of service. So that's the idea behind abicollab.net. Then we have this company which is formed to commercialize abiword and abiCollab, and it basically operates this .net web service. Okay, so Ben talked a little bit about the abiword document model, and it's essentially a series of linked lists, a doubly linked list of objects. And these objects are things that we call structures. These are things like paragraphs, tables, start and end points of frames and the like. Then we have blobs of text separated between these, and all of these have locations within this document. Now originally this was actually a physical linked list. Now with abiword 3, this is actually a red-black tree, which means that we can insert and do insertions, deletions and changes all in log n time. So abiword 3 is now substantially faster on extremely large objects, extremely large documents. That's one of the extra cool features in abiword 3. So the basic idea is that the model, we have a document model and it communicates via opaque listeners. So we have a document model and then we have views that are attached to this model. So these views can either be things like an actual view of what abiword looks like when you print it, when it's on the screen, or you can export or import to different file formats through these views. So the idea of abiCollab is it's just an extra listener that sits on the end of the document model, then that serializes all of the changes that happen to the document model, broadcasts it via some link to an abiCollab on the other side, and then it talks to the other document model, which then updates its views as the original document changes. So this all happens via these things called change records. So every change to the piece table emits these change records. And abiCollab serializes these change records and transmits them over the internet somehow. So the core principles of abiCollab is that documents must always be identical and that users should not be surprised by anything that happens. So in other words, if I type away, I expect my collaborator to see all of the changes that I make as I make them, and if I press undo, I only expect to undo the changes that I make, not the changes that my collaborator makes. So from the start, abiCollab was designed to be able to be used without a server. So this allows direct connections and no locking. So this is a big advantage of abiCollab over, say, Google Docs or Nero documents or whatever. We've designed a very flexible transport API which allows different transports. So far we have XMPP via Jabber, via the loudmouth library, direct TCP connections, telepathy connections, our web service, and the presentation a little bit earlier, Ben got all inspired and said, oh, we could do a Tor service too. So we could be totally anonymous because there's nothing particularly special about this. All we need to know is the start point and the end points, and we've got all the framework in place to just broadcast stuff out. As long as we can recover it on the other side, that's all we need to do. Okay, so there are a number of problems that you need to overcome. It's not a trivial thing to enable real-time collaboration of a document. And there's things called internet lag, worrying about undo, redo, worrying about complex operations, worrying about actual collisions where two operations happen on the document at exactly the same time, or at least within the internet lag time. And we've worked out ways to get all around these, and I presented these back in 2008. So you can look back to that and see how that was all done. So the fundamental topology of this is that we have some central master document. The only way you can actually make a network work in real time is to actually have a star topology. So you need to have a pairwise connection between all of your different documents, all operating through some central service, in order for all of these changes to remain in sync. So the idea is that if Ted remains in sync with Alice, then Alice will make sure that Ted's changes get broadcasted to Bob and Jane and Carol, and whenever Bob makes a change, that change is immediately observed in Alice, and Carol, Jane and Ted will see all those changes as Bob makes them. So this is actually the only topology that works for a large-scale collaboration. Now, the cool thing about abiCollab is that this is actually all within a particular word processor. It's not on a central server anywhere. So one of the things we've done is that if Alice goes away for some reason, then we pick someone else to be the central server, and then they take over the role of maintaining the collaboration. Took a lot of work to make all of that go, but that all goes now. Okay, so just a little bit about OLPC, since we're very proud of this. abiword has a lot of different things and features. So one of the things that abiword has is an embeddable Python component, which is essentially a GTK program that you can just plug in with a little bit of glue, and lo and behold, you've got a word processor in a piece of Python. So we use this to make write for the OLPC project. And the cool thing about this is you get absolutely all of the features of abiword via this embeddable code. So this is oops, doesn't advance. This is the basis of the OLPC write program. So nice example of write in action. And one of the cool things, the very cool thing, is that about the OLPC project is that it actually has this serverless mesh network that operates in environments without a server, and abiword works perfectly under these scenarios. So individual children can just join together and work on a document together. So this is one of the goals, of course, of the OLPC project, is to enable this sort of collaborative editing of documents and collaborative working together, because children learn more effectively when they can teach each other. And this is kind of the idea behind that. Okay, so as I said before, it's fundamentally hard for users to find each other on the internet. Knowing someone else's IP behind a NAT translation device is almost impossible. So we invented this web service. So you basically connect via HTTP over port 80. We can tunnel through firewalls, so you can use it within a corporate environment and tunnel outside of your corporate environment. And this is just using standard web technology. Everybody knows that port 80 is safe, right? So it's the one thing that's open to the world, so that's what we use. Then we have this central server which redirects packets. So we have all of these different abiwords, but actually Alice is still the document model. It's still the central connection. So Alice goes to this packet director and talks to Bob, Carol, Jane and Ted, and then changes in Alice then get redirected out to Bob, Carol, Jane and Ted as each of these things happen. So this web service is just a packet redirector. It doesn't actually house an abiword keeping everything in sync. So consequently, our web service is an order of magnitude less compute intensive, or more than an order of magnitude compute intensive than, say, Google Docs, which actually does have its central document actually on the web service. So we're a lot more scalable than Google Docs. So this means that we can actually run our web service on, small little machines. But having done that, why not go the whole cloud route and actually have a document repository as well? So that's what we've done. So this is our service, abicollab.net, and it's totally free. You can just log in, you get a gigabyte worth of document storage there. This is my site, and I've got a whole pile of tags associated with all of my different documents, like abicollab, abiword, admin, ARC 2001, ARC2. The ARC is the Australian Research Council, and every year I have to apply to it to ask for more grants. So these are the different grants that I've put together. First year teaching, Google Summer of Code 2008, stuff to do with karate, physics, recipes, and personal stuff. So, here I was working out exam solutions in 2009 in this little thing here. So I actually use this. I use it all the time. It's great because I have a laptop, I have a desktop, I have a central server, I have a home desktop, and I can never find my documents. So I just put them in the cloud. And people worry about putting stuff in the cloud, but I know this is safe because it's mine. So you can trust me. And not only that, this service is in the Netherlands, which is in the safest, most liberal country in the world. Okay. So here's a bit of corporate stuff about why you actually want to use the cloud and why you want to use abicollab, because you don't have to email documents to people when you work on them. So this is the fundamental thing that slows down collaborative document creation. I make my change, I email it to someone else, they make their change, they email it to someone else, and so forth. So what you actually have is you just connect to the same document and you just do your bit. So Bob writes introduction, Alice is working on chapter 3, and Ted is proofreading and correcting Alice and Bob's work. You can revert and undo. There's a history feature, which means if you screw up, you can go back to an earlier version. Actually, all of these documents are in an SVN repository. So every time you click save in abiword, you update it and you go to a new version in your history. If you've screwed up, you can go back. The service allows document conversion from RTF, ODT, abiword, text, HTML, PDFs, and so forth. So that's all useful. When you connect directly to a working session, and you always get the latest version. So this is a nice feature. So you don't have to worry that you've got the wrong version. As soon as you connect to your document, you see the absolute latest version as Alice is typing in it. So, all right, so in addition, you can track progress. So we have this central repository. You can always find your documents. Everything is encrypted. All of these change records that go from one document to another are all encrypted via SSL. So you don't have to worry about users taking documents out of your company on USB sticks or copying them to their home directory, because it's all encrypted by this process. You can set up groups so that you can organise teams to work on a particular document, and then this is a really cool thing, you can publish an update. So you can actually give people a URL and you see the latest version as soon as they click save on the web. Okay, so I forgot to use the bullets there. All right, so these are our conclusions. So we're happy to take questions at this point. So Ben can come up. RDF allows abiword to know what you mean. The content is secondary to the semantics. Companies now have a motivation to actually put content in documents, as RDF allows this simple authoring of more meaningful documents. Yep, sorry, I'll just shut up and answer questions.
I'll just get you the microphone as much as it's working.
Thanks. Is this working? Good. Can anybody else run their own abiCollab server?
Absolutely.
Okay, that was the short question.
The problem is you have to pay us money. At this point, it's not an open source piece of software yet. It could well be, but it's not yet. And it's not trivial to set the thing up. So initially the idea was to sell virtual machines, but I don't know if we'll do that or not.
Any further questions? Speak now, forever hold your peace.
Yeah,
I think that.
Another question.
Oh yeah, okay. You have a second bite of the cherry, no problem.
When you're creating a document and there's several people involved, somebody wants to add an image, does it compress the image before it sends it? Because some people might add a photograph. The photograph itself might be 3 or 4 megs.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
No, it's you get all the full image of whatever, you get everything in it.
Yep.
So if you make a JPEG, then that JPEG is preserved in abiword, and that JPEG is transmitted. Okay. And JPEG's as compressed as you can get anyway.
Yeah. So if you're sending it, I've got the image on my desktop, I add it to the document we're working on.
Yep.
Where does it store it on the other machine when the other people are working on it?
So what would happen would be you insert your image.
Yep.
And it would get shoved into a change record, and that change record would be transmitted. And however long it took that change record to go to its destination, all of your typing would be buffered locally until that image was received. And then all of your extra typing would get transmitted after that.
Yep.
So the cool thing about abiCollab and the way we satisfy internet lag is that we can recover all of that.
Yep.
So if your person would be happily typing away over there, but you would still get all of that back in the right order.
Yep. But they would have access then to that image. Say somebody decides to stick an image in, and I think that's ridiculous resolution that you've got on that. I want to make it smaller.
Yep.
So the document itself overall is smaller as well.
Yep.
Because you're only going to be, you're not going to be doing some massive presentation with it. They have access to it then on their machine, so they can modify it. Okay.
And if they decide that your image is crazy, then they'll make a change to it, and it'll get reflected back on your document.
Fantastic.
I should also mention that the RDF stuff in ODF, if you save to ABW, the triples from RDF actually go into the ABW file. And also if you're, I should go over here. I should grab the microphone.
Should grab the microphone.
Excellent stuff. Well, this microphone. It works. 2 microphones. Is this happening? Yep. Excellent. If you have RDF in an ODF file, and then if you save that as an ABW file, the RDF is actually serialized in ABW as well. And if you export that as rich text format, the RDF goes with it as well. And if you bring that back again, the RDF, I've made great efforts to make sure that the RDF doesn't mysteriously go away. So if you're saving it to formats that are not ODF and you read them back, you're still going to have the triples. But you can get rid of them if you want, but
So all of this RDF is transmitted via abiCollab as well. Oh, and the final thing I have to say is that abiword 3 will have as an option to use ODT as the default format. So we've finally got all of the features in abiword. I think there's one you have to do. I'm not sure if you've done it yet.
I've got the annotation end is now happening.
Ah, okay, so we've got all of the features now
Yep. That was a good one.
in ODT.
You can actually mark, I'll grab that off you again. If you mark a range for an annotation or for such things in abiword, it'll save that using the annotation end marker in ODF. And if you load that into OpenOffice or LibreOffice, it'll quite happily drop the annotation end, so your annotation will collapse to a single point in the document. But abiword can preserve ranges, and if other document tools get updated to, be more ODF friendly, then everyone's happy, and you don't actually lose data. It's just if you open it in something that doesn't support it, it gets collapsed to a point.
Yeah, that was one of my fundamental issues with ODT for a long time, but Ben's fixed it.
Yay. Okay. No further questions? Could everyone put their hand together for Ben and Martin for their work on RDF and getting Abby into the browser? We have a small token of our appreciation from Linux Conference Australia 2012.
Ben can have it.
It's going to go that way.
Excellent.
And we'll make sure that everyone gets a little, at the very least, a little card.
Yeah.